Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Wandering Podcast, where we take advisement from outside the box. I'm Rihanna Ritter, your host. I'm an intuitive, sexuality, and authentic expression coach. Are you an accomplished professional who plays the part of having it all figured out? Who's strong for everyone else, but feels lonely, misunderstood, like you can't tell anybody the truth about how stressed you are, how not passionate you are about your life and all that you've created? I guide my clients to deep, lasting fulfillment. I re-engage them with their bodies, their pleasure, their desire. I help them align to enjoy fulfillment and prosperity in all areas of their lives. Today, my guest is Jennifer Neville. She's a hypnotherapist, mindset, and manifestation coach, helping clients remove blockages and unlock their full potential. Welcome, Jennifer.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, it's so great to have you here. So, how does one get into hypnotherapy and mindset and manifestation coaching? Like, let's go back to the beginning, childhood, like what was going on with you growing up that led you down this path?
So I have a background. I was a former professional athlete. I played golf, which was a very mental sport. So I learned very early on, like the power of the mind and how, you know, you can get to a certain level physically, but to really get to that kind of top level, I knew it would take a lot of adjusting my mindset and, doing a lot of mindset work. And it just became sort of something that I was really passionate about. And once I walked away from that career, I was about like 26, 27 years old. And it was a really hard shift for me because my whole identity had been wrapped up in this sport. And one of the tools I started utilizing was hypnotherapy. I was going to hypnotherapy sessions and it had such a huge impact on me and my life. And I saw how much it helped me. So by the time I had like established my coaching business and I had really settled into kind of the next phase of my life, I just thought I was like, I had like this time period where I was sort of pivoting again. And I was like, why would I not get my hypnotherapy certification or take that level just to add that tool into my business? And it was like the best thing that I've ever done because I get to see that the way that it transformed me, I get to help other people have that same transformation. So it's just always been this passion for understanding how the subconscious mind works and how we can reach our full potential by just making these little adjustments and tweaks to our mindset.
Yeah, that's amazing. I am nowhere near a professional golfer, but I have been golfing. My ex-husband taught golf, and
Okay.
yeah, the mindset for that game is, I think it's more intense than any other sport that
Yeah.
I've ever tried, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, and what I found was to stop like thinking about what I'm doing technically and just visualize where I want the shot to land. That
Yeah.
was how I, made the most improvement in my game.
Yeah,
But,
exactly.
yeah, and
And
so that's kind of what we teach clients, right?
yeah, is kind of and I think that's like a big thing too. When I was playing golf, I was way more of a feel player, so I sort of let my body go into autopilot, and I still kind of teach that in a way, whatever you're manifesting or whatever you're creating. I work with a lot of clients in in regards to love and relationships, and it's really encouraging them, which is what I love about hypnotherapy, is it forces you to feel what's going on in your body, like the sensations of the emotions. And I think that's like so important for people who maybe struggle to feel their feelings.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm definitely a person who was pretty dissociated from my body for most
Mhm.
of my life. I grew up Jehovah's Witness. My family had like generational abuse patterns. And so there was so much like shame and disconnection from sexuality and the body
Mhm.
that it caused a lot of numbness and like just trying to escape all the time. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, somatic healing is kind
Mm.
of the thing that I really enjoy. And just getting back into the body and
Yeah.
trusting it. especially when you've been taught not to trust your body. I think in most fundamentalist Christian religions, we are taught that our body is not to be trusted and
Yeah.
to do everything from the mind. Right?
Yeah. No, I think it's a really interesting topic too when it comes to, because even on my own journey, and I think working with a lot of people, I've noticed that it's way more common, especially with women, to have that sort of disconnect or maybe even like that toxic relationship with our bodies because we're trained to, or we're kind of conditioned by society to believe that we have to look a certain way or we have to, you know, be ashamed of our bodies, or if we do look a certain way, then we get more attention. So there's this like disconnect that I think a lot of people experience. And even in my own personal journey, I'm still on a journey of learning how to connect more and be more present in my body.
Yeah, yes, I am too. And I think it's just a lifelong journey, but it's really awesome when you have some tools and you get to practice because it makes it a lot easier. And that's kind of what you're doing for your clients, right? So
Yes.
through hypnotherapy, and what other kind of journeys do you take clients through?
So I do breath work and the hypnotherapy, I root it in a little bit of the somatic healing and really helping them like identify the sensation. I like to do nervous system regulation with like the cold plunges and again kind of connecting to the body but understanding that it's just emotions are just sort of these sensations that are happening. It's the way that our body communicates with us on that subconscious level. So sometimes it can create discomfort, and if we're so present in our body, like we're kind of letting in all that like sensory experience. So just helping them get clear, like especially when we're doing emotional work, really getting them to focus on like what is that sensation in your body? What does that feeling feel like, you know?
Yeah, that's so important, especially for people who have been taught that their mind, I mean, I think most of Western society believes that our mind is the only thing that we need to operate from. And
Mhm.
we get really lost in these thought patterns that are totally repetitive, and it clogs up our creativity. And I found that when I started actually feeling in my body, I was actually capping my pleasure
Mm.
by like coming back and disassociating, being like, no, no,
Yeah.
no, I'm not used to this. This doesn't feel safe. So,
Yeah.
do you find clients? Do you run into that? That
I find that a lot, and that's like a big thing that, especially with my manifestation clients, when it's like they're at the final end of this journey of doing like this self-concept work and they reach this end point where it's like, okay, I've done everything. Why hasn't it shown up? I feel like it's that worthiness is the final factor. And from my own personal experience, I've gone through like a major weight loss and I've struggled with, you know, unhealthy relationships to eating patterns and like disordered thinking, and sort of the same thing where I kind of, once I started doing this deep healing work and really getting clear on the relationship I was setting with my body, I'd realized that like some of those behaviors where say I'd practice like binging or purging, it was sort of this way that I was like, "Oh, I'm not allowing myself to hold pleasure. I'm not allowing myself like, I'll take the pleasure of eating this thing, but I'm not allowing myself to hold it. Like, I don't feel worthy of just allowing myself to enjoy that experience and then not do anything, I have to, like,
yeah,
reject it." So,
like
I think it's really interesting. I think it all tethers back to what do we feel we're worthy of, you know?
absolutely, yeah. And it's really interesting. I'm part of these different groups in Facebook, religious trauma groups and
Mm,
childhood trauma groups, and so many people are just do not feel worthy. Like they don't even feel worthy of looking for help when they
yeah.
think about investing in coaching, or even, I mean, therapy. I think there's a lot of stigma attached to therapy
Mhm.
because we think mental health, like if your brain isn't driving you forward into productivity every day, then there's something weak about you.
Yeah.
So if you're going to therapy, then you're just weak. And then for coaching, it's like to make that kind of financial investment in themselves, it really comes down to not feeling worthy of it.
Yeah. Well, and there's so much because even with weight loss clients or, um, my business coaching and stuff, it can manifest in so many different ways. And it all boils down to, am I worthy of showing up for myself? Am I worthy of focusing on myself? Am I worthy of my own attention? And that I think you experience a lot probably working with people in love and relationships where it's like because I get a lot of people who want to like manifest love or manifest a specific person. And it's recognizing that your desire to even put your attention onto somebody else is a way of escaping yourself. It's again a way of manifesting. I'm not worthy of my own love and attention, so then I'm going to project it outwards, and that's what's manifesting in me trying to pursue this person who at the moment the story I'm telling myself is that they're not choosing me, they don't love me, so I have to manifest them.
Yeah, yeah, and that's where you get anxious attachment,
Mhm.
right? And you
Mhm.
see those, and like you were saying, you're projecting outward the feeling that you're not, the need that you're not meeting your own emotional need with
Mhm.
yourself. Like if you have a really strong inner critic, you're not being kind to yourself, you're self-abandoning often, you're it's something I call self-flagellation because of my religious background. I
Mhm.
think to like, like nuns and monks like whipping themselves when they
Yeah.
feel that they've sinned because they've had a desire, or like they've eaten, or they had a sexual desire, like things that are very natural and part of staying alive in a
Mhm.
body.
Yeah.
Being taught that that's really sinful and wrong and dirty. It's just it's so interesting how people don't don't even realize they're doing it. Like they don't
Yeah.
even realize, they think it's true. They think it's
Yeah.
part of their identity.
Yeah, and you've normalized that sort of relationship with yourself, and that was kind of when I, especially on my weight loss journey or my healing my relationship with my body, was recognizing the way that I thought before was beyond disordered thinking. It just wasn't, it makes no sense to me now why I would do the things that I would do, but it was normalized.
Yeah, yeah, and it just becomes a habit. It's like a
Yeah,
long-term pattern. I think it's 90%, maybe 95% of our thoughts are repetitive. And so
yeah,
don't when we don't like take the spaciousness to disengage from the thoughts and
hmm,
not make them our identity, um, and then just maybe like watch the thoughts as an observer and be like, oh, that's interesting, and offering them some compassion and
yeah.
uh, yeah,
Well,
some
and that's where hypnotherapy comes in and it really exposes the thought patterns. And especially if you have somebody facilitating there for you, because, once clients expose, sometimes they'll have the click, but having that facilitator there to be like, oh, do you think that maybe, then once you expose that thought pattern, that's when that shift happens because it's like, oh, wow, I never even realized that that was how I was operating in my brain. I didn't think there
yeah,
could be a different perspective.
of course, yeah, because we only know what we know. And then when
Mhm.
we have a facilitator, because we can do a lot of healing work on our own, and you kind of have to once you
Yeah.
start the job or the journey. Like even if you have a coach, like I think most great coaches do have coaches.
Yeah.
It's always good to keep your development going, right?
Yeah.
But coach can't be with you all the time, so you do have to learn how to do all this reparenting and self-compassion and observing on your own
Mhm.
in between, your sessions. And it's but to not have a guide or a facilitator, you can still very easily get stuck in
Mhm.
the mindset that's already there,
Yeah.
because you don't have anything else. you can read about it, but you really, when there's personalized attention and someone giving you feedback and saying like, well, this is what I see, and it's all this like loving, positive, beautiful
Yeah.
observations, and then you're like, oh, whoa.
Yeah. Which is, it's cool because in hypnotherapy, like I said, it's really, I'm just facilitating the experience, but it's interesting to get to see them have that shift because you're normally going to a root memory and then you're handing the mic off, you're having them talk to the antagonist in their mind, and then you're kind of handing the mic back and forth. So they'll work it out on their own and they'll have that shift where they're like, oh my God, I get it now. Like I get that it's always been me. I'm the one here fighting in my head. And now it's manifested into I have a fear of public speaking. Cause that's kind of like how the hypnotherapy works. You come in with this problem. I keep attracting unavailable men and I want to break this pattern. You know, a lot of people come in for stop smoking, weight loss, all those things. But the way that I work with it, it's like, I want to manifest my dream relationship, but I keep attracting avoidant men and then getting to the root of that. And once they connect it to that early childhood memory and they can like flip the script on their own, it does give you this sense of power moving forward of like, I can do this for myself too, you know?
Yeah. And I found that I was avoiding getting into relationships because
Mm-hmm.
I was on the healing journey and I was like, yeah, I'm feeling a lot of love and light right now. And if I get into a relationship, I know that these old patterns are going to flare up and I'm going to, have these ugly behaviors. And I don't want to do that or see that. And I wasn't ready, for a while, like
Yeah.
a year and a half. And then finally, I was on a retreat and had a friend that was like, you have to be in the arena,
Yeah.
you're not gonna learn without it. So, you can get a lot of insight into your past behaviors, and it's really good to take a
Mm-hmm.
break and take some time to really get to know yourself. And at some point, you do have to be in the arena and you have to let those things flare up and then not make it like, oh, I'm such a bad person. Oh, I'm not
Yeah.
healed.
Well, what's helped me with that is I have a nervous system regulation routine, which is doing my cold plunges. A lot of people are like, oh, the health benefits are great, but I personally use it for that nervous system regulation of putting myself into extreme discomfort and learning how to get through it and using that as sort of this tool for expanding my capacity for discomfort because I recognize the same thing when I had healed from this traumatic breakup that I had and I had like done all this work for myself and I was getting to that point where I'm like, oh, I'm ready for love. Why is it not showing up? And then I kind of put two and two together. I was like, oh, I'm I feel so comfortable that I'm not ready to get uncomfortable again.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
that's why I always advise to my clients or the people who watch me online is make sure you have some kind of nervous system regulation practice or do something that gets you out of your comfort zone, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. Being
Being
in the comfort
uncomfortable.
zone is just not, it doesn't facilitate expansion by any means. And I like that you have like a cold plunge. It's like it kind of shows you what you're made of, like it helps you
Yeah.
build confidence in yourself and like, whoa, this is hard and I can get through it. So I do like opposites. I do
Mhm.
something that's hard and like Temez calls,
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
or a cold plunge or a breathwork session. And then
Mhm.
on the other end of that, I'll do self pleasure.
Okay.
And so that can be really uncomfortable in just allowing the real desires to come forward, to
Yeah.
like just like all the emotional stuff that happens in self pleasure when you're just observing like how
Mhm.
resistant you are to the pleasure, how much you're holding it down, how much
Yeah.
you're feeling shame, like just to be present with all of that and then to expand your capacity for pleasure. And
Yeah.
an easier one is to
to eat something delicious and like sit down
Mm.
and pay attention while you're doing it and really feel the
Yeah.
texture and smell it and taste it. You know, that's where you want to start. Self
Yeah.
pleasure's a
No,
whole.
and that's interesting because, like I said, with that observation I had made earlier in my kind of journey of like, oh, I'll binge on things that I find pleasurable. I'll binge on all of this stuff. But then there's a part of me that's like not present, or it's like a mindless experience that I'm
Yeah.
really not holding the pleasure, I'm not like, especially when it came to like food or even like the physical sensation of it. It's like I wasn't really present for it. I'm just like doing it because I can or because it's available to me, but then I can't, like there was a part of me, I guess, that didn't feel worthy of it, so it had to immediately like get rid of it.
And almost like not allowing yourself to be nourished by it. But
Mm-hmm.
also like, I mean, part of binging is like you get too full, right? So
Yeah.
it's to some degree it's just that, but the other degree it's like, why will I not allow myself to feel nourished? Like you can find these deeply wounded inner
Mm-hmm.
child parts that are kind of almost suicidal. Like,
Yeah.
I'm not going to let myself, you know, have what I need to survive. I'm resisting, you know,
Yeah.
money, whatever, all the things that are needed for basic survival. When you really get deep into your shadow work, you can find these parts and then like offer them a lot of compassion and try to reparent them and find out why they, you know, want to leave so badly, you know, depending on how deep a person's
Yeah.
trauma is.
Yeah. Well, and to tie it back into the whole religious thing, I grew up Catholic and like confirmed Catholic, went to Bible study, and I had my own personal religious trauma that once I started doing the deep healing work, what I found fascinating, because I would have never expected this, because I would always be the type of person who, one of the cool things about hypnotherapy is we're supposed to show up to another person's toolbox and utilize their tools. So we use their language. Not, I wouldn't bring my
Yeah.
toolbox into somebody else's space, right? So we get clear on what is your higher perspective. So my higher perspective was always, I am God, or God is like within me and I'm the creator of my reality. And I realized that was sort of a like, once I got deeper on that, I realized like, oh, even my higher perspective is based off of my control, my control issues. And I had this one session that was so deep because at the end of it, we do like a processing where it's like, what would feel even better than you feel right now? So it'd be like, I need to know that the universe loves me in one of these sessions. And then they were like, okay, as you can conceive of that, I want you to go ahead and step into that. And I got there, and then they were like, would anything feel even better? And I had this like emotional break because I was like, I need to know that God loves me. And I had this like huge moment of breakthrough because I didn't even realize that was there. And I was joking with a friend of mine afterwards. I was like, I brought God, like capital God, like he showed up. And it was kind of like this healing moment where I was like, I didn't even realize that like religious aspect had tied into some of my stuff.
Recently, I found that I had, it's kind of like this feeling of being watched all the time. It was feeling like Satan was this entity that wanted, like, if I loved too much, or if I
Mhm.
wanted something too much, or I had too much pleasure or joy around something, then Satan was this entity that was going to come and take that thing away from me. And on
Mm.
the other hand, I had God there telling me that it was sinful to want something that much and is going to punish me or kill me for even wanting it. So I had it like
Mm.
coming from both sides, like, don't
Yeah.
do anything that you enjoy or don't have any
Yeah.
desire.
Yeah.
Some pretty intense religious stuff. I mean, Jehovah's Witnesses, it's
Yeah, very.
something else.
I
But
mean,
yeah,
I think the religion is just interesting in general how it plays in, and I've been really, because I've studied A Course in Miracles, and there's certain things that I've like reinterpreted what I see. So I like to stay open-minded for everyone. because I don't want to take away from anybody's beliefs and things like that. But I know my personal, it's just interesting because I'm like, what is it that brings the trauma? Because some of my friends who grew up like Christians don't have the same, don't have that, like everybody that I know who's like a grown-up Catholic has some kind of religious trauma, and I'm like, maybe it's the strictness around it, and then to like take it another level to something like Jehovah's Witness and things like that, like it's that element of like the strict the
Yeah,
strictness
yeah,
of it.
yeah. There's just like you were talking about control,
Yeah,
and being the creator of your own reality. Like for me, that definitely started to manifest as a control issue. And
yeah.
I was so used to being so tightly controlled,
Mm-hmm.
because the way that these religions kind of make you believe that you're always being watched, even Santa Claus, like
Yeah.
Santa's watching, don't do anything bad, right?
Yeah.
And we just, I think it's just labeling our desires as sinful.
Mm-hmm.
And really, our desires are probably pretty innocent overall. Like most of what we desire is not to murder another person. It's like
Yeah.
I might have this interesting sexual kink desire, but
Yeah.
is it really bad, or is it just that it's not the missionary position with
Yeah.
my husband that I'm married to? Like it's all about control. It's not about
Mm-hmm.
most of these things are not inherently bad. Like the only thing I'm very focused on sexuality because it's just what I'm interested in.
Yeah.
But I lead these sacred sexuality calls for a community that I'm in, and just I was in a process with a guy, and I was like, can you allow yourself to have the real sexual desire that you have right here, right
Mm-hmm.
now? Can you just, you don't have to say it out loud, just can you say it to yourself? And he's like, no. And like he's like hot, he's getting hot, his heart is racing, and I'm like, okay. And I'm just like guiding him through, like, what if it's not actually bad? What if there's no
Yeah.
sin in it? What if it's just a desire and a thing, and if you met it, nobody would die as long as it's consensual,
Yeah.
and somebody has to be capable of consent. So like if you desire to do something sexual with a child, that's not really going to work
Yeah.
out because they're not capable of consent. So if you've got two coherent people who, their prefrontal cortex is fully developed and they're capable of consent,
Yeah.
and you express that you want to do it together, or even if you want to do it by yourself, it's not going to harm anything in
Well,
most cases.
and I've learned that it's such a invitation to reach that deeper level of intimacy with a person, because when I had gone through that realization of mine of not holding pleasure, because I was dating somebody and it was like, I think the first relationship where I was recognizing these things and really allowing myself to open up to another person in that way. And I remember he kind of, as I was realizing this about myself, he kind of called me out on it too. And he was like, if it's pizza, you're going to eat till you're sick. And then you're going to be mad that you ate till you're sick. And then if it's like, with sex, you're doing it till you don't, and you're not getting anything out of it. And it's like, there's no satiation for you. And I was like, man, that's what I'm working on.
Mm.
And it's almost like I couldn't feel anything. So I'd be trying to get myself to the point of feeling. And then it was such a great push for our relationship too, to like deepen the intimacy, because I was able to share like, well, actually, I would like to try this. And it was like a whole evening dedicated to, we're going to make this happen for you. So, you know, whatever it takes to get there. And there was like a no judgment phase. And that was really beautiful and helped me kind of moving forward, be able to show up in as myself or express myself in the way that I wanted to, and allow myself to, feel good with another
Yeah,
person.
and that's the sort of relationship and intimacy that you're calling in once you're doing a lot of this healing work. And then
Yeah.
to be able to show up in that relationship and see the other person as not being a threatening
Mm-hmm.
person, like when you can lower your hypervigilance
Yeah.
and just start seeing the other person as just another human that also has desires, and like we're
Yeah.
not trying to like control or compete with each other. um, then you can start to have beautiful intimacy like that, where the partner
Mm-hmm.
will show up and dedicate an evening to meeting your desire, and it's
Yeah.
just so beautiful and exciting, and you get to show up in that partnership and not be perfect,
Yeah,
and to
exactly.
go through your process and not have this expectation that, no, I'm healed, so I'm not gonna, there's gonna be no drama, I'm not gonna be reactive about anything.
Yeah. Yeah, that was a relationship where it was definitely a lot of trauma healing, but there was a lot of like trauma expression too. But he was just very patient, and everybody serves their purpose. So yeah, I think it's definitely allowing yourself to, because I think for some people, at least in my case, it's so much easier to have those like self-pleasure practices versus meeting somebody in that experience, inviting somebody into that experience. And that was kind of that shifting moment for me where I was like, oh, it's safe. It's safe for me to actually sit here and be like satiated.
And I think that sense of safety comes from knowing yourself well enough
Mm-hmm.
to, like, if you can't even express your desire to yourself, how are you going to communicate it with a partner? Like,
Yeah.
I can't admit it to myself, so then saying it out loud to somebody else is definitely off the table. When you can start to accept yourself enough to accept what your desires are and not be judgmental and be like, okay, this is who
Yeah.
I am, this is self-discovery, it's gonna be all right. And then you can
Yeah.
start vocalizing it with another person. You can start asking to have your needs met, you can start setting boundaries.
Mm-hmm.
So many people just avoid conflict, and I'm one of them, like, definitely.
Well,
But
and I think it was interesting to see, because now since then it's like I think that people enjoy that. People enjoy being like, people want to please you, or people want to make you feel good. So it's like giving people that invitation to show up in that space, and telling them what to do versus like them needing to guess
oh
or
yeah,
you
the
pretending.
so half of the women in the world is like, it's kind of a rough statistic, but do not
Mm.
orgasm, like have
Yeah.
not orgasmed. Inviting another person in and having an experience with them in that way, you cannot be pretending that you're having an orgasm, because guess
Yeah.
what, people, we don't read each other's minds, we really
Yeah.
don't. And when you when you're a person who's used to people pleasing and perfectionism, and you cannot communicate what your needs are because you don't feel worthy of asking for what you need,
Yeah.
you are going through life expecting people to read your mind, and then you're feeling resentful that they're not.
Yeah.
And that's not going to lead to any measure of happiness. Just
Exactly. But feeling that safety, I think, is like safety within yourself, really, to be able to ask for those things and to show up in that space.
what are some resourcing activities you do, like when you're in a situation and you start to feel unsafe, like how do you bring yourself back to safety?
I
Do you
think
have
it's like
practices that,
I have strong boundaries. Like I just learned that manifesting, capacity expansion, and I think this is where people get mixed up, because they think, oh, if I say no more, then then I'm not going to expand. But sometimes I think being like having those strong boundaries is what helps us build that level of self-trust. So it's not like, especially in a sexual relationship or an intimate relationship, if somebody is sharing something with me that makes me uncomfortable, it's standing strong on those boundaries and communicating, not being like no and shaming, but being like, hey, I'm not there yet. This makes me really uncomfortable. Let me, especially in the day and age that we live in, I'm sure a lot of women, um, and men, I think it's more probable, but that the women are encountering men who have certain proclivities and addictions to things that they're seeing online. And sometimes I've shown up in relationships where it's like, I guess that's normalized. And so in the beginning, I have to very clearly just communicate what intimacy means to me. This is what
Yeah.
intimacy is for me. I'm not shaming you for what you like. It's just I'm not there yet, and I'm not comfortable with knowing these things about you yet. You know, I'm still getting to know you on a more intimate level, you know, and setting those hard boundaries and establishing that trust with myself, knowing that I'm going to protect myself, knowing what that feels like in my body to show up and protect myself, and then being able to establish the trust with that person. Because if they're disrespecting my boundaries and pushing it, then it shows me who they are. But also getting to, on the flip side of that, every time I've had those conversations, it's been a beautiful experience to watch them show up and respect those boundaries.
And so you'll see in people who are anxious attachers, even avoidant attachers, I think it similarly shows up in, I can't handle being left. I can't handle abandonment and being rejected. Like, I think that's one of our core childhood wounds for almost everybody, the fear of abandonment. Like, being rejected or over criticized by a parent because of what you really are means you're going to be left, and then you're going to die if you're a baby because you can't take care of yourself, right? So we walk into all other future relationships with this terror of abandonment. And when we start processing those childhood fears and realize, oh no, I'm not a child, like my inner child has been running me as an adult, but I'm safe. I can rely on myself. If this person rejects me, I'm not going to reject me. Like, that's how you get to a place of safety where you're willing to set boundaries with people instead of doing whatever they want to please them.
Because that's self-abandoning.
Yeah. And when you self-abandon, there's no self-trust left.
Exactly.
And every time you diminish your own trust in yourself, your self-esteem falls, your performance in life falls, your creativity gets, so all areas of life become contracted instead of expansive.
Yeah. And maybe there was a past version of myself who would have played into those things, but now when I feel uncomfortable, I will communicate it. If I feel like there is like a getting past it, I'll communicate that. And I think I've moved so far past the fear of rejection that what I manifest is never rejection. It's always kind of an experience for us to go even deeper, build even more trust with one another, you know, because some people just are, more out there, and there's nothing wrong with that. And there's nothing wrong with me being more reserved and timid. It's just finding that person who's going to create that safe space.
Yeah. When you're not fearing your own self-rejection, then you can show up differently in relationships. You can, and oh yeah, because you were saying you're not fearing rejection, like you're feeling you get to go deeper with the person. And then if you don't choose that and you guys don't expand together, if you find that there's like just a misalignment with your desires, then you don't feel like, oh my God, I'm so heartbroken. Like this, you just recognize that, oh yeah, I mean, you're not bad. I'm not bad. This just doesn't work. We're not jiving, and that's okay. So it's good information. I'd rather know that now than years down the road where we're pretending to be something that we're not.
Yeah, that's so true.
Do you want to leave the audience with any kind of message that you feel that feels alive right now, or you can just tell us where to find you?
I guess with everything that we've talked about, just kind of that reminder of really getting to know your body, the sensations, getting familiar with those so that you know when your gut is telling you like, ooh, this is uncomfortable. Oh, this is not. And this is the last thing I'll say, and then I'll say where you can find me. But I had seen a video once that was so good where it's like, especially because I'm a generator who operates from my control center as my sacral. So what I've learned to do is really ask myself, like, am I tired? And like, yes, am I happy? How, like, asking yes or no questions and like going with like or and really learning those kind of triggers for me so that when that is showing up, I feel strong enough to be like, no, this isn't right. Something's uncomfy here. I'm saying no to it. Like learning how to say no to that uncomfortable feeling. It'll save you so much time and energy because when you say yes to it, and then you're like, that's why that uncomfy feeling was there 3 weeks later. So learning how to do the technique is so great. And then, yeah, you can find me currently on Instagram. It's Jennifer N. Neville. And on TikTok, I am the Country Club Witch, but Jen Neville self concept.
Yeah, and so we'll put those links in the show notes. And I just want to highlight what she's talking about is human design. When she's talking about she's a generator with her sacral authority. Different people have different human designs, but if you are curious to check that out, it's a great tool to help you guide you in your life. It can be a little complex, so if you work with a coach or a practitioner that's well versed in it, then that helps too. So thank you so much for being here and taking the time today. It's great talking with you.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.